Welcome back. The Israeli Prime Minister has been the subject of scathing international criticism for much of his political career. Since Israel launched its operation to root out Hamas, following the October 7th attacks by that terror group that killed 1,200 Israeli civilians, senior political leaders in states that are friendly to Israel are concerned that Netanyahu is now an obstacle to peace. The most significant intervention came from Chuck Schumer, the United States' Senate Majority Leader, who is Jewish. Schumer called for elections in Israel and made clear that he thought it time for Netanyahu to exit the political stage.
The fourth major obstacle to peace is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the settlers in the West Bank. Now, if Prime Minister Netanyahu's current coalition remains in power after the war begins to wind down and continues to pursue dangerous and inflammatory policies that test existing U.S. standards for assistance, then the United States will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy by using our leverage to change the present course.
To find out how all this is playing out in Israel, I'm joined by former Israeli diplomat Alon Pinkas, who joins me from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for coming on GB News. First of all, why do you think that Chuck Schumer delivered that speech and made those points?
Hi, Michael. Good to be with you again. I think there were three reasons or three explanations to his speech. The first was that it serves the president, that he uses proxies to exert pressure on Israel. The second explanation is that there is a increasing fatigue, disappointment, and disillusionment with Mr. Netanyahu, whom the Americans do not necessarily any longer see as an ally. And the third explanation, Michael, would be that this was a sort of an introduction to a series of American moves, even though Mr. Schumer, although he's the Senate Majority Leader, is not a policymaker, but rather a legislator. This was the beginning of a series of moves that the Americans are thinking of making. And the response predictably came very quickly. Mr. Netanyahu today accuses the American administration of no less than lacking conscience and conscience. And that instead of pressuring Israel, they should pressure Hamas, which doesn't really make sense unless Mr. Netanyahu, and I think Mr. Schumer called it right, unless Mr. Netanyahu is intent and deliberately seeking a confrontation with the Biden administration.
As ever in the United States, this has led to polarization. Republicans have attacked Chuck Schumer. And right. They, I think, are showing a pretty willful disregard for the degree of controversy that now surrounds Netanyahu in Israel. Do you want to speak to that point, please?
You broke up. To disregard for what, Michael?
The Republicans, in criticizing Schumer, are showing a willful disregard for the truth of the extent of controversy in Israel about Netanyahu's premiership.
Okay, well, there are two things here. First of all, the Republicans, ever since October 7th, have refrained from attacking Biden for a very sinister and quite predictable political reason. They have seen that his support, his unwavering support for Israel, is actually costing him politically. He's hemorrhaging votes in several swaths of the American electorate, Arab Americans in Michigan, the African American community, and particularly across the board amongst the young. And secondly, on what you referred to, Michael, and that's a critical point that you made, Mr. Schumer was speaking after knowing or being cognizant of the polls in Israel, that indicate clearly that 70% of Israelis want Netanyahu to call for an early election, 65% think he should resign, 69% think that he's being driven by political survival rather than the well-being of the hostages and a ceasefire.